So good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. My name is Nicholas Wagner. I am an employee at the International Renewable Energy Agency, located in Bonn, Germany, at the Innovation and Technology Center. I welcome you today to our Transport Action Team webinar focused on electric mobility and renewables, providing a perspective from REmap 2030 and regions around the world. I would like to first go through a few details with you before we start. If you're unfamiliar with IRENA, we are an intergovernmental agency mandated by countries around the world to promote the widespread and sustainable use of all forms of renewable energy. IRENA has 140 members and 32 states in the process of becoming members. We have our headquarters in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates, and an office here in Bonn for innovation and technology, at which I am located. Short disclaimer that before we begin, we would like to share a quick note that IRENA does not endorse or recommend specific product or services within its webinar series. Information in this webinar is featured in the IRENA Renewable Energy Learning Partnership database and the REmap webpage as just one of many best practice case studies and sources of information on latest developments. If you are interested in finding out about future webinars offered through IRENA webinar series, or are interested in future renewable energy learning opportunities, please visit the IRENA Renewable Energy Learning Partnership website. We will also continue today's discussion online under the REmap discussion board on that webpage. Any questions not answered today during the Q&A will be given to the speakers and responses may be posted online. We highly encourage you to participate today through asking questions. You'll notice on the panel from GoToWebinar that there's a questions section. At any point you can submit questions. These will be collected, and at the end we will discuss these with the speakers and also, as I mentioned, at a later point online. It's unlikely we'll be able to get to all the questions, but we warmly welcome you to submit every question that comes to you, and if we cannot address it today, we will certainly pass it on and try to address it to the community. To briefly overview the agenda for today, I will give a short overview of REmap 2030, and then we will move on to our presenters. We have 4 presenters today from around the world. Thank you very much to those presenters for agreeing to talk with us today, and for some of them either to wake up very early in their day or stay up quite late. We highly value your participation. Our first presenter today will be Lewis Fulton. He is the Director of Sustainable Transportation Energy Pathways Project at the University of California, Davis. He will be providing an overview of the electric vehicle market with a perspective largely from the United States. Our second speaker will be Jian Liu. He is a researcher at the Chinese National Renewable Energy Center in Beijing, China. He will discuss EV developments in China with a specific focus on grid implications. Our third speaker will be Dr. Guillermo Maya. He is Head of Strategic Projects at VDI Innovation and Technology in Berlin, Germany. He will provide an overview largely of the EU and the European market. And our last speaker today will be Carolina Obandano Anzola. She's an expert at the Colombian Ministry of Mines and Energy in Bogota, Colombia, and will be overviewing developments in Latin America, specifically in Colombia. If I could just add, finally, we will discuss in the last 15 to 30 minutes any questions with the speakers. So please, if you have any questions, submit them via the questions function. I will now briefly overview REmap 2030. REmap 2030 is IRENA's global renewable energy roadmap. It is the project here at IRENA under which this webinar is organized as part of our Transport Action Team. REmap is our global roadmap for developments in renewable energy with the time frame looking out to 2030 with the objective of operationalizing an SEL, Sustainable Energy for All objective that aims to double the share of renewable energy in the global energy mix by 2030. It is an iterative country-based bottom-up analysis involving 40 countries representing roughly 80% of global energy use. We also supplement these with regional analyses for Southeast Asia, East Asia, Latin America, and upcoming Africa. As I mentioned, the objective of REmap is derived from the Sustainable Energy for All initiative, which looks at how the world can achieve three interlinked objectives. One of those objectives is a doubling of the rate of energy efficiency. The second objective is universal access to modern energy, or elimination of energy poverty, essentially. And the third objective is a doubling of the share of renewable energy in the global energy mix by 2030. IRENA has been designated the hub for that third objective, and REmap is our internal project that operationalizes that objective. I won't go into too much detail, but I will say that what's clear from REmap is that we need to unleash innovation and deployment in the end-use sectors. Power sector is, of course, very important, but as are the end-use sectors of transport, buildings, and industry. And REmap is an inclusive look at the entire energy system. And so I will share with you briefly in the next slide a few findings from the report that we released in June of last year that essentially shows you the development over the next 15 years. In 2010, which is the base year of our analysis, renewable energy and total final energy consumption was 18%, half of which was traditional uses of biomass. In order to double this, we have to reach 36% by 2030. If we achieve the second objective of SE for All, universal access to modern energy services, we would need to, of course, eliminate traditional uses of biomass. So in reality, we're increasing the share from approximately 9% today of modern renewable energy to 36%, to as much as 36% by 2030. In order to achieve that, there needs to be significant growth in all sectors. Specifically, the power sector sees significant growth from around 20% renewable share today to 44% in 2030 under REmap 2030. The transport sector, however, sees the least, sees significant growth, but sees the lowest share of renewable energy, from just about 3%, almost entirely liquid biofuels, to just 5%. In REmap, we've identified options, technology options, that include biofuels, advanced biofuels, but also significant deployment of electric vehicles that can increase this share in the sector's final energy consumption to 15%. What are some very high-level findings that are relevant for today's presentation? One is that electric vehicles see very significant growth to about 160 million vehicles by 2030, roughly 10% of the total car fleet of around 1.6 billion by that time. There is also, in addition to that, a very significant deployment of electric 2- and 3-wheelers on the order of around 500 in operation at that time, 500 million, excuse me. More information you can find at irena.org/remap. I welcome you to visit the website. We have really a whole lot of information there. The Transport Action Team was derived from these initial findings. The reason is that we identified certain areas where renewables could have a transformative impact, and one of those is the transport sector. It's also clear from the findings that the transport sector is one of the areas which needs the most action because of its relatively slow growth and continued dominance in 2030 of petroleum products for fuel. So the Transport Action Team was created along with several other action teams, and its purpose is a network that enables sharing and coordination of work, best practices, policies, and technology developments. And it's also meant to align the efforts of various IRENA projects, not just REmap. We have very interesting work being done in our costing team, in our innovation team, in our country engagement division that could be aligned to kind of realize this objective of higher shares. It's a thematic focus. It can have a country-specific focus. In the case of the regions that we're discussing today, it could also have a technology focus, as is also the case today. What type of engagement do we seek and that we coordinate? Well, it can really be quite broad. We are looking for sharing of analysis and data. We're looking for examples of best practice and policy advice. The results of today's discussion will be summarized and then shared with the Transport Action Team, and this will evolve into an issues paper that will eventually provide significant input or be the basis of the electric vehicle discussion in the next volume of REmap, which is slated for release early next year. So with that, I would like to shift to our presenters. Our first presenter today will be Dr. Lewis Fulton. He is co-director of the Sustainable Transportation Energy Pathways Program at the University of California, Davis. There he leads a range of research activities around new vehicle technologies and new fuels. He's also a lead author of the recent IPCC Fifth Assessment Report on mitigation. He has previously worked as a senior transportation specialist and division head with the IEA, where he led the development of the mobility model, MOMO, and transportation-related analysis of ETP. He also worked with UNEP and the US DOE. So with that, I would like to enable Lewis here. And
hi. So I'm guessing you can hear me. It looks like the sound is okay. Thank you very much, Nick. And Nick will advance my slides for me. I appreciate that. And I will, in my brief remarks today, try to set the stage here in terms of where electric vehicle developments are around the world, and also, as Nick mentioned, a little bit of a special focus on the United States. I thought it was interesting that in the REmap numbers you presented, Nick, that you mentioned I guess a target of 160 million plug-in vehicles on the world's roads by 2030. That's an interesting number. I'll come back to that. I'd like to mention that in addition to the STEPS program at UC Davis, we have the Plug-in Hybrid and Electric Vehicle Center, which is a partner, a sister group, about 30 researchers focused entirely on plug-in vehicles, led by Tom Turntine, and I think some of you may know him. And quite a bit of my work is actually drawing on their work, or my presentation is drawing on their work. So let's go ahead. Next slide. So this is the basic picture, as best as we can measure it from a range of data sources at the end of 2014, that there are about 1 million plug-in vehicles on the world's roads, and they're almost entirely in Asia, Europe, and the United States, and surprisingly to me, evenly distributed across those three regions of the world. And let's go ahead and keep clicking to get all the text on the slide here, Nick. 1 million is a lot of vehicles. This is about 5 years of sales since the new generation of electric vehicles began, really in 2010 or 2011. And I think it's interesting, you know, in September there will, we estimate it'll be in September when the 1 millionth electric vehicle will be sold. But at the same time, this is only 1/10 of 1% of the world's 1 billion vehicles. So it's not anything like 160 million at this point. And so I think it'll be interesting to see how it grows. And it's been growing reasonably rapidly, but it's a half empty or half full glass situation. In 2014, the sales in the year were around 300,000. We estimate it'll grow to something like 400,000 this year, about 0.5% of the world's sales this year. And it isn't the kind of growth rate that's going to get you to numbers anything like 160 million in 2030. So what we have is a kind of a steady but fairly slow growth rate given the small base. And in order for us to see the kinds of market shares that are consistent with the scenarios that IRENA has and agencies like the IEA have, where these are really consistent with the 2-degree scenario, IPCC type scenarios, we're really going to have to enter a steep phase of sales, something that you picture as an S-curve, and we haven't, to our minds, we haven't seen the beginnings of really moving up an S-curve. And so part of our research at UC Davis is to try to understand why we're not seeing that and what it might take to see that. And a part of what's going on is that we don't have sales in very many places. They're really concentrated in, even in the United States, about half the plug-in vehicle sales are in California, so there's not very strong vehicle sales in other parts of the country. And we know that even in Europe, some countries have much higher market shares than others. Next slide. And in the same vein, here's a third-party data set on the sales of individual models in the first quarter of this year, so it's very, very new data. And some models are doing pretty well, but about 5 models of plug-in vehicle account for about half of the world's plug-in vehicle sales. So those top 5 you see there. And again, this is a sign of a nascent market. In any world where plug-in vehicles compete in much larger market shares, we're going to need to see dozens of successful high volume products. So I think that's part of what's going on as well. We're still in fairly early days in terms of the numbers and the variety of vehicle models that are out there. Next slide. And keep clicking here. So Tom has come up with an interesting way of looking at this. He's noticed this for hybrids and for other car-related technologies, but typically because cars are produced on something like a 5 or 6 year product cycle, Prius is a good example where the first ones were in the late 90s, and then there was an updated new model introduced in around 2005, and then another one more recently. And with each introduction of the next generation of these models, you get a lot of technology jump and new technologies coming in. You get some cost reductions, you get big improvements, and this is consistent with seeing these models do better and enter into larger segments of the market. And so we think we're basically at the beginning of what you might call phase 2 for plug-in vehicles, and this should be a good sign. We're getting some new models in the last 12 months that are really notable, and that should help boost the sales of plug-in vehicles around the world. Next slide. And here are some examples. These are examples of the first, what we call the first gen offerings, and people should be fairly familiar with a lot of these cars, but typically they had characteristics like plug-in hybrid vehicles with 10 or 20 miles of range, or the extended range types like the Volt with about 40 miles of range. And I'm sorry, these slides are US oriented, so multiply by 1.6 to get kilometers. And extended range battery vehicles like the i3, it's actually very recent, the Leaf being a full battery electric vehicle, and then a few models like the original Tesla that have much higher range, but really only the Tesla. So if we go to the next slide, we'll see that we're getting a new rollout and what's coming in the next couple of years in the US and in other parts of the world too. If you can hit that once more there, Nick, is a bunch of new models that bump all the numbers up somewhat. And I think the most notable one on here is the picture of the Bolt, that orange car. That's the 4th one down. That's a prototype that it looks like GM will produce within a couple of years. And so this would be the first 200-mile, possibly 200-mile, 300-kilometer, lower cost, lower market, compact battery electric vehicle. So I think the Tesla's had that kind of effect. We see several manufacturers now announcing plans to introduce much higher range battery electric vehicles. So that should be interesting. We're getting higher range on plug-in hybrids. The new updated Volt will have higher battery range, and so on. So there's a bunch of new products coming, and I think that's going to make a difference. Next slide. I won't talk about the infrastructure, but I will say that, of course, the amount of energy and in particular the amount of CO2 that these cars save, if any, is dependent on their efficiency and the carbon intensity of the electricity grid. And I know we're going to hear more about that from some of the other speakers. And it also depends on what you compare these vehicles to. So here you have a generic example of two different types of battery electric, a more efficient one and a less efficient one. And in fact, any given battery electric might show up on either of those diagonal lines depending on the driving conditions. If it's a hot day with the air conditioner, they may look like a less efficient one, and if it's optimal conditions, they might look like a more efficient one. But compared to the relatively efficient internal combustion engine vehicles on the road today, you would need power plant CO2 on the order of 400 to 600 in order for this car to be saving you a lot of CO2, at least at the modest efficiency level. At the more efficient level, then it's always going to save you some CO2. And as Nick pointed out to me, a recent publication from IRENA estimates that the global CO2 intensity, the average CO2 intensity around the world is around 500 right now. So, you know, EVs should give you some benefit, but if the internal combustion engine vehicles keep getting better, and he's just shown us now that by 2020 we estimate that hybrid vehicles, even now the Prius is pretty much getting under 100. A lot of models are getting under 100 now, and so it makes the bar, in this case lower, but in a sense makes the bar higher for the plug-in vehicles to give you CO2 reductions. And then click once more, Nick, and you'll show that we estimate that by 2030 our best internal combustion engine vehicles, which probably will be hybrids, may be down below 60. So it forces us to keep pushing very hard on the carbon intensity of electricity generation. And I think by 2030 we'd better see the carbon intensities dropping below 300 if we want to have electric vehicles providing a significant benefit over the best new internal combustion engine vehicles. Okay, next slide. I know I'm going to run out of time soon. I'm going to probably have to skip some things. This is just a slide that shows that we've got a lot of different research going on at UC Davis. I'll skip that. This is a result of one of our recent studies, and there's a lot of different studies coming out of our plug-in hybrid and electric vehicle center that are interesting, and they're doing a lot of consumer surveys, and I think and they're beginning to do more consumer surveys around the country, not just California, and I think some of this would be very interesting to replicate in other countries. But what we're finding is that the level of awareness of both the existence and the availability of plug-in vehicles and also the incentive systems that you could access when you buy one of these vehicles, that there's really shockingly poor awareness of this among the general population in a state where an electric vehicle is driving by the average person, you know, once an hour. You see them all over the place. So only around 50% in any of these states is aware that they can get a very large federal credit, anywhere from $2,500 to $7,500 when they buy, depending on the model, and even much lower are aware that their own states have additional incentives. And in California, we've found that only around 50% of the car buying public are aware that they can walk into a dealership and buy a plug-in vehicle. So I think awareness is a key part of growing the market. Next slide. Similarly, well, not similarly, but in this talking about credits again, it really matters very differently for different models. The very price-conscious buyers, if you look at the bottom bar here, Nissan Leaf, about half of them would not have bought that Leaf if they did not get the incentive, and quite a few would not have bought a car. They picked up the Leaf as an extra car. This is California, where people might have 4 cars because of that incentive, whereas people buying Teslas are relatively insensitive. These are wealthy, very wealthy people, and they would have bought the car anyway. So tax credits matter differently for different people, and we're beginning to understand that dynamic. Next slide. I'll skip that one. Just going to move to wrap up. And so thinking about the future, there have been a lot of different projections of how many electric vehicles we may have out there. The IEA picture in the upper right here has 20 million by 2020 that came out of their outlook in 2013. That is built up from national projections of what countries are targeting, and so to have a target is not the same thing as predicting that it will happen. But I think it's now safe to say we're very unlikely to have 20 million plug-in vehicles on the road by 2020 unless sort of a miracle happens in the next few years, since we're only selling less than 500,000 a year right now. So next slide. We're beginning a new study at UC Davis to look globally at the various dynamics that affect plug-in vehicle sales, like consumer awareness and the interest levels in different countries, the rate of new model appearance, as I was showing earlier, what kinds of models are making an appearance, where are they making an appearance, and you know, how many are there, and how might we expect that to change over the coming years. And we are going to do a deep dive on looking at market segments, and so trying to understand how these vehicles appear in different size classes and price classes of vehicles. So this is a study we're doing over the next few months, and the next slide is just a teaser of the kinds of things we're going to be looking at. This is the C-class segment in the United States. It's compact cars, and if you just look at that one segment where there are a couple of different plug-in models available, you see that in the less expensive car offerings in that segment, basically no hybrids and no plug-ins are sold. As you move to more expensive cost categories in that segment, hybrids begin to dominate. Hybrids actually dominate that segment above $27,000 price tag, and in the $31,000 to $35,000 price tag, plug-in vehicles are almost half the market of a very small market. And so we're going to try to isolate these things and understand, how can you grow the market into these other classes and other cost segments. And I think part of it is going to be that we have to see things like battery costs come down so that electric vehicles can compete in the more mainstream parts of markets. And that's it. The last slide is just my hypothesis about the results. I think we're going to do a couple of scenarios. I think the baseline type of scenario is going to show that we're going to very possibly be stuck at low market shares for plug-in vehicles for a while. And unless we can increase consumer awareness, unless we can bring costs down through policies, things like that, we need to reach a tipping point where we begin to shoot up the S-curve, and we're going to try to identify what that looks like. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Much, Lou. Great overview, and thank you for pointing out some of the issues with the numbers. To answer your question, I mean, REmap is not a business as usual reference case. So the 160 million number is certainly an accelerated perspective. And let me just pull up. And certainly we're not on that trajectory now, but this is something that we view as certainly being realistic if policies and technology developments were to be achieved in the next few years. Also, regarding the carbon intensity of the power sector, I think we're closer to 600 today on a global average. Some markets, countries such as China, are well over 800. And we see under the reference case this only decreasing to a little below 500 in 2030, and in REmap that would be significantly lower, probably at around 350. So we are entering that range where, based on lower efficiency or higher efficiencies EVs, based on the graph that you provided, they would be very similar or beat internal combustion engine efficiencies in 2030. But with that, I would like to now introduce our next speaker. If you could excuse me, we had PowerPoint crash, so I need to advance through to our next speaker, Dr. Jian Liu. He is an assistant researcher at the China National Renewable Energy Center of the National Development and Reform Commission. His research interests include electric vehicles, energy storage, and their synergy with renewables. He was working at IRENA as a program officer, graduated from Oxford University and Beijing University of Technology in Transport Engineering. So with that, let me enable the microphone for Jian and give him presentation. Jian, you may start.
Yes. Okay. So can you see?
Yes, we can see. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. All right. Thank you, Nick, for your introduction. My name is Jian Liu from China National Renewable Energy Center, which is an energy think tank for the government. And today, my presentation is about electric vehicle development and its implications in China. So, firstly, I will give you a general picture of electric vehicle development in China And then I will introduce about the EV studies in our center, such as energy and emissions from electric vehicles, and the EV charging impacts on the power grid and their storage applications. And we also do some analysis for cost benefit and the employment economic impacts from electric vehicles. It's also our research interest. So in China, although we have a variety of new energy vehicle technologies, currently only battery electric vehicles, plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, and fuel cell vehicles can get the government subsidies. And for some other new energy vehicles, such as mini electric vehicles, electric bicycles, although they are getting higher market share in some second class and third class Chinese cities, they are not eligible for government financial support. And some pictures on the right show some typical electric vehicle models made by some Chinese car manufacturers. And this slide shows some key EV policies in China, including the vehicle subsidies, which are dependent on their vehicles or electric range, and also infrastructure price, which is given to the cities to encourage charging infrastructure investment. And we also have some other measures, such as, for example, some EV drivers in big cities in China, they can exempt from restriction on license plate registration, which is also widely introduced in some Chinese cities, such as Beijing. So this figure introduces the electric group and over time. So you can find here in 2013, introduced the new for vehicles. So because of this policy, the vehicle ownership increased back from 2014, and although we can it's still difficult to get the 2015 target, which is
Aditya, sorry, John, I think we've lost you. Can I, John, can you?
Okay.
Okay, you're back. Can you please, we haven't heard you for the last 30 seconds. Could you please repeat what you were discussing?
Okay, sure. So probably this slide, electric vehicle growth.
That sounds good, yeah.
So it's about a summary about electric vehicle sales in last 5 years. So because in 2013, the Chinese government renewed the demonstration program for electric vehicles. So we can see a fast increase of electric vehicles ownership from 2013 to 2014. And even though we see this fast increase, it's still difficult to get the 2015 target, which is around 500,000 in 2015, which is around about 4 times of the level in 2014, which is a high target. So in our center, we have EV studies ranging from environmental impacts, some technical issues, and economical considerations. So let me start from the environmental impacts. So which is mainly about energy and emissions from electric vehicles. So firstly, we need to evaluate the electric vehicle market penetration in different transport modes, and then we compare different vehicle fuel technologies, and then estimate the fuel efficiency for each kind of this vehicle fuel technology. And we also consider the vehicle degradation, which means some vehicle's performance will decline when the vehicle is getting old, such as the vehicle survival rates and the fuel efficiency and driving intensity. It will be different along the vehicle's life cycle. And then we aggregate all these factors to estimate the transport energy use and emissions through a different model. And this slide compares 2 scenarios in terms of the China's transport energy mix to 2050. And through this comparison, we can find the total energy use in transport sector and also the energy mix in transport sector. And we also do some analysis for the electric vehicles life cycle. In this kind of study, we compare energy use and greenhouse gas emissions between electric vehicles and petrol plants under different green energy penetration levels. So in addition to the emission reduction, electric vehicles can also provide a very important service in the power system through the energy storage and the V2G applications. So this issue becomes very important in China in recent years because renewable energy in China is increasing very fast in last 10 years, which requires much higher level of system flexibility in the power market. And in theory, electric vehicles can provide a very important flexibility for this power system. So in this study, we need to find some key factors that influence the electric vehicles V2G capacity. So we need to, again, to evaluate electric vehicles market penetration in different transport modes, and also we need to include different electric vehicle powertrain technologies. And we compare different charging modes from low-speed AC charging to high-speed charging, and some new charging options such as battery swap and wireless charging are also included in our study. And the tricky point is operation pattern, and it means we need to understand the driving behavior in China, and some key factors such as charging frequency, people's daily travel distance, and their travel time profiles need to be studied. And then we aggregate all these key factors through a mathematical model to forecast the EV charging and recharging load. And this slide shows some primary V2G capacity simulation results. So from this picture, we can find electric vehicles can provide a large potential for power system flexibility. In our case study, if we have a lot of electric vehicles, such as millions of electric vehicles, then they will help the power system to accommodate much more wind generation, especially in the early morning period. And in a bigger picture, in our 2050 renewable energy roadmap study, electric vehicles, along with some other key power system flexibility options, provide a very important energy storage capacity in the power system. So this kind of new technologies will guarantee a high share of renewable energy in China's energy mix in 2050. So in addition to the technical potential, we also do some analysis for V2G cost and the benefit. And for the cost, the V2G cost is highly relevant to the battery degradation. And this degradation cost is also decided by battery's life cycles and the depth of discharge. So in our study, we need to identify the battery degradation cost for different battery technologies and different depths of discharge. And for the benefit, we also need to do some calculation about power market compensations. So this compensation can be very different among different countries. And it means we need to collect some power market price data from Europe, from the United States, and also from China to find some potential market performance of electric vehicle V2G operations. And in our study, we also find some new business models will play a very important role in future electric vehicle market penetration in the power system. We assume in future some aggregators will collect the electric storage capacity from electric vehicles on the demand side and help EV users to do some business with the power market through demand response and ancillary services. And we assume this kind of new mechanism will largely increase B2G operation efficiency. And another very important issue is a cost benefit of electric vehicles compared with petrol cars. This issue is very important because in China, this cost benefit is deciding the charging price policy in China. So the guideline is to make sure the charging price is high enough to encourage electric vehicle infrastructure investors to do the investment and to recover their investment in the long run. And also we need to make sure the charging price is not so high, and we need to make the electric vehicles economically competitive with petrol cars in the market. So finally, a very important issue is economic and employment impacts of the electric vehicles. So this kind of research is trying to answer some big questions, such as transport electrification will generate any employment, and this kind of and so what kind of will be the price increase.
Jian, thank you very much. It was a very interesting presentation. At the end, we lost you, but that was only the last 15 seconds or so. But it was particularly interesting to see your focus on the power system. I know recently CNREC came out with this 2050s high renewable scenario, a roadmap that had a very high, laid a very high importance on electric vehicles, and thank you for presenting and discussing that. We received some questions regarding that. So let me move on to the next speaker. Our next speaker is Dr. Jeroen Meyer. You can advance the slide. He is head of strategic projects at the Future Technologies in Europe department at VDI Innovation Technique located in Berlin. He is leading a team of experts in future trends in transportation and information technologies. He's previously worked in California at Stanford University as a researcher at Hitachi Global Storage Technologies and LBNL. He's a member of the European Commission's Industrial Advisory Group for the European Green Vehicles Initiative, the head of the Office of Innova Strategy Board on Electric Mobility in Germany, and editor of the Springer Book Series Lecture Notes in Mobility. As of January 2015, Dr. Meyer assumed his role as an operating agent for Task 1, Information Exchange, of the Implementing Agreement, Hybrid and Electric Vehicles of the IEA. So with that, I would like to turn on his microphone and share his screen. Dr. Meyer, you now have the stage.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can hear you. Please.
Hello, this is Jeroen Meyer. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Please.
Yeah, can you please share my screen again? Obviously, there was an issue.
We see your screen. If you just go full screen.
Perfect. So then I can start. Okay. Sorry for that little delay. Nick, thank you very much for introducing me. I'm happy to talk a little bit about electric mobility in Europe. And as you can imagine, this is not a very easy task because Europe is consisting of almost 30 countries, and depending on what you define, how you define Europe. But and I would definitely not be able to describe electric mobility in all of these countries. But given our new role that you mentioned already in the introduction of being the Task 1 operating agent for information exchange in the implementing agreement hybrid and electric vehicles, we do have a little bit of an overview of deployment numbers and also of policies and activities in all these countries around the world, but also in many of them in Europe, particularly those that are having a strongly growing electric mobility market at the moment. And just as maybe a general remark, as you were looking particularly, as IRENA, looking particularly into these links between electric mobility and renewable energy sources, the notion or that these trends or these fields need to develop hand in hand is very widespread in Europe. But of course, the focus is a bit different, depending very much on the specific energy mix in each of these countries. I'm sure IRENA has a very good overview of how these energy mixes do look like in all these countries, but I'm still trying to explain a little bit in the cases that I'm showing you how this is actually considered in the specific countries. So when I do this, I said I'm doing it a little bit from the perspective of this new role in the implementing agreement hybrid and electric vehicles. I don't want to dig deeper into this, just want to let you know that there is an annual report describing developments in electric mobility in 18 member countries and some more around the world, which is available right now from the website of the implementing agreement. You have the web address in the bottom here, and you can find specific descriptions of the activities in the various countries there. So if you haven't got any of the points that I'm mentioning, want to dig a little bit deeper into it, this is probably one of the sources you may want to use. What we are doing here in the very first place is trying to understand a little bit the evolvement of the market for electric vehicles, plug-in hybrid vehicles, and fully electric and battery electric vehicles, but also hybrids around the world. And what we're doing at the moment there is try as we are in this new role, try to assess the data that we are getting from official sources of these various countries in a bit of a systematic way. And this is what I'm showing you for Europe here on the next slide. A little bit still work in progress, as we have just got those data a couple of weeks ago for the end of 2014. These are the total numbers of electric and plug-in hybrid vehicles on the roads in Europe. Where you see a zero, it could also be that it's just not a number that hasn't been reported, so that it's not available. So don't be confused too much. But what we are seeing here, I think, fits very well into the description that Lou just gave in the beginning of his presentation, saying that probably around the world there's 1 million electric and plug-in hybrid vehicles, and that there is a certain well, more or less equal distribution around the world. So this is the European part. For example, if you look into passenger cars, passenger vehicles, for these two categories, you end up with a total number of 200,000. If you add all the motorbikes and trucks and buses and so on, it may be close to 300,000. From the numbers that we are having and analyzing them, for example, just for the passenger vehicle segment, our total number at the moment is 700,000. But I think if you include all the others, it will be close to 1 million. Anyway, those numbers just tell little if you do not compare to overall market share or market size in the various countries. The countries that you're seeing here in Europe can be quite different in size, and also in size of car market, of course. And there's a couple of countries that obviously are in the lead of developing electric mobility markets at the moment. If you take a closer look into the numbers, you will see France, Germany, the Netherlands, Denmark, for example, and specifically also Norway are playing an important role here. And we'll take a look into 4 of those on the coming slides. So for France, Germany, the Netherlands, and Norway. So first case I'm showing you is France. France, and I'm trying to give a little snapshot here only. I mean, as we are just observing those things a little bit from a distance, but as Europeans, of course, we know the one or the other fact, but total picture is probably something else. So in Germany, I would say we have it. In France, as said, there may be some points missing. But in general, France has the goal to reduce fossil fuels by 30% in the coming 15 years, and they will want to boost the electric vehicle plug-in hybrids markets for that, and will also want to put quite a significant number of EV charging points on the roads. What's important to understand is that France does have a very strong share of nuclear energy in their energy mix. It's about 75% or so, so it's very natural, I think, for them to say that by introducing electric mobility, they will be able to reduce the use of fossil fuels if they do not count nuclear energy as a fossil fuel. They have several laws for the energy transition supporting this, and a couple of, I think, serious incentives, like a conversion premium that you get when you purchase an EV and dispose of your old car, a bonus-malus system for purchasing electric vehicles. So if you buy a conventional car, there's a certain tax that you have to pay, but a reduction that if it's an electric one. They also have a tax credit for installing a charging system. France does have a couple of very big funding programs for research, development, and implementation of electric mobility. One example is mentioned here, the Investment for the Future program that is about installing the large-scale charging infrastructure for electric vehicles. I mentioned the market development already. They do have a strong automotive industry. One example from production is the Renault Zoe. Renault has a couple of electric vehicles out on the market now. The Zoe is a unique, so pure electric vehicle that has been developed from scratch. And there's one highlight that I think everybody knows who has had a look into France development electric mobility. That's their electric vehicle car sharing system in Paris. So that's just a snapshot for France. Going further, we can take a look into Germany. In Germany as well, electric mobility is seen as part of energy policy. As you may know, in our country, after the Fukushima nuclear disaster in 2011, our government decided to phase out nuclear energy completely within the next 10 years. And this, of course, will mean a stronger a share of renewable energies in the energy mix. As far as I recall, at the moment we are having a 25% nuclear energy share in the energy mix, but this will probably grow to 40–45% then in the coming years. And this, of course, means that there is a certain share of, and a growing share of, fluctuating power inputs to the energy grid, and in electric vehicles and batteries of electric vehicles being connected to the energy grid are considered a way to balance out these fluctuations. In view of this, our government does have a goal of having 1 million electric vehicles on the road by 2020. If you take a look into the actual market numbers at the moment, we are having a total of, depending on what you add into it, but less than 40,000 vehicles on the road. So it does appear a little bit enthusiastic, but on the other hand, the production facilities in Germany for electric vehicles are just starting to grow. Just a few more things, maybe in terms of policy. There's an electric mobility law that has just been enacted a couple of weeks ago. It will give a couple of incentives to users of electric vehicles in cities. Even so, it's still up to the cities to implement those. But what's really important to know is that there is no real monetary incentives for a buyer of an electric vehicle in Germany. There may be some for company cars that have some limited value, but there isn't anything general like in many other countries, which may be one of the reasons why the market has not really started at the moment. At the other hand, there's a couple of nice innovations. If you just take a look into the bottom here, what is in production, I'm not just mentioning Volkswagen, BMW, and Audi cars here, but there's also one called Street Scooter. Actually, it's on the front cover of this IEA report that I mentioned in the beginning, which is a delivery van, a modular vehicle that now is built and produced by German Post DHL, as this is a very fit-for-purpose solution for them. So beyond Germany, let's take a look into Norway. Very small country in the north of Europe, which, okay, has a goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions as well, but what you should know is that in this country, almost 90% or even more of the energy is from hydropower. So it is somewhat green already, depends of course on where the original energy came from, but at the same time they are a producer of fossil fuels themselves, so they may have a bit of the intention to increase the green image of their energy system, I believe. Anyway, in this country it's important to know that they're really the best in class in putting electric vehicles on the roads in Europe. What they are having is actually they don't have any own vehicle or vehicle manufacturing in their country, but what they are doing is if you import a vehicle to Norway, you have to pay quite a high import tax, and this import tax is zero in case of an electric vehicle or a plug-in hybrid vehicle. And actually this makes an upper class electric vehicle still cheaper than a conventional one, and it's quite a strong reduction of costs that you're having there, and I think electric mobility is benefiting from this in Norway a lot. Actually, as I said, that this import tax cut will hold only for the first 50,000. They actually a couple of weeks ago passed this number of 50,000 electric vehicles in Norway and just decided to continue it for a while, I think for another 20,000. So they also have a lot of more incentives that, for example, like free parking fees, free ferries, free access to tunnels and things like that. So best in class in Europe is Norway. And as you can see on the bottom here, the real market share of electric vehicles is in the medium around 15% or even more. All right, so coming to the Netherlands. The Netherlands is a country that are at the moment pushing for offshore wind energy generation a lot, and I think electric mobility fits very well into it, as this is another very nice link of mobility and transport to a power source that is green by definition, and that does also have this fluctuating part in it. The Netherlands do have a couple of incentives as well, but what's specific about the country is all the demonstration activities that are very prominent, like for example the A15, first sustainable highway in the world, or the other that you can see in the bottom here. Schiphol Airport just acquired quite some Tesla Model S vehicles for a taxi fleet. Well, coming to my last slide, I'd like to also talk a little bit about the European Union as such. Even so, most of the policy frameworks and the incentives are regional policy frameworks of specific countries in Europe. The European Union does have the role as in very big policy frameworks, like for example the one that I'm mentioning here under goals on this slide, which is taken out of the white paper on transport. The goal is to cut carbon emissions in transport by 60% until 2050, and they're saying, well, this requires that we abandon conventional fuels cars from cities completely by 2050. So quite a serious goal, and there's a couple of sub-goals and milestones on the way to it, which do look as ambitious as this one. They are having a couple of policy measures in place. The most significant one at the moment is the CO2 emissions regulations, which requires the fleet of a vehicle manufacturer at average to comply to less than 130 grams CO2 per kilometer, and this will drop to 95 grams CO2 per kilometer by 2020. And if you remember the slides that Liu has shown, you will agree that this is quite ambitious. And in case vehicle manufacturers cannot comply to it, the penalties are quite high. So it's really something a vehicle manufacturer has to think of, and this is probably one of the pushing reasons for them to have electric mobility in their fleet. Another policy action that is quite important is the directive for the deployment of an alternative fuels infrastructure, which requires that all member states in Europe are developing plans and can present plans on how to create an infrastructure for the not just the electric vehicles but also for other alternatively fueled vehicles in the country. The assumption is that for 10 electric vehicles you will need one public charging spot, and I can imagine this will even further be further developed in the coming years, because it does not talk much about fast charging infrastructure, for example, but that could play a role in the future as well. And finally, the European Union is also has a framework in place for funding of research and development in the area of electric mobility. I'm just mentioning here the European Green Cars Initiative and the European Green Vehicles Initiative, public-private partnerships that are funding research and development in energy-efficient vehicles and alternative powertrains. So that's thinking together this idea of reducing the energy consumption, at the same time making sure that the energy that is used is actually can actually come from renewable sources. And that, of course, means mainly electric mobility, and there are around 100 projects running at the moment, and some of them have already resulted in product developments and product presentations by companies. So that's it in a nutshell about Europe. As said, there's many other countries in this region, and there's many very nice examples, but just a very few within this 10 or 12 minutes that I had. Thank you very much for your attention.
Gerion, thank you very much for the comprehensive overview. We know Europe's quite diverse with many countries, and I think you provided a good snapshot from several of them. We will now move on to our final presenter. And I've asked that Carolina be a bit more concise. We are running a bit over time. I want to remind everyone you're welcome to submit questions. You can do that through the questions function. We've received quite a few, but please continue to send those in. It looks like we will have about 15 minutes of discussion once this presentation is over. Our next speaker is Carolina Anzola. She is a chemical engineer with a master's degree in environmental engineering. She has worked as a researcher at the Universidad de los Andes and projects of transportation and environment for Bogota, and as a coordinator in a consulting firm for issues related to environment and development. Currently, she is a specialist professional at the Colombian Planning Unit for Energy and Mines and in charge of the energy demand projections and projects on energy efficiency in the transport sector. She will provide a bit more of a micro focus on a country, in this case, Colombia, and I turn the mic over to you. You may start.
Okay, but do you hear me right now?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
I think you hear me right now. Okay, so thank you very much for the. Okay, thank you very much for the introduction. I'll go fast through the presentation. So first of all, I want to talk to you about UPME. What is the national government vision around the electric mobility issue here in the country, the incentives schemes we have currently, and the projects that have been developed around electric mobility, then a little relationship between electric mobility and renewable energy, and then the next steps we are going into the electric mobility issue. Okay, so what is the UPME? I am not directly from Mines and Energy Ministry. UPME is like the technical hand of the Mines and Energy Ministry, and we are in charge of basically plan the mining and energy development of the country, manage the information of the sector, and then be like a very high support in terms of formulation of public policy. We also do demand energy aging areas. We are the think tank of the sector in the country, and we promote all related with energy efficiency. Okay, so what is our government thinking about electric mobility? We have the National Development Plan goals, which are 2014-2018, and as you can see, we have kind of objectives in terms of new technologies for transport, but when you see the part of electricity is not that much. So the goal for 2018 is having 96 additional electric vehicles into the national fleet. We're going to see in some minutes why is that happening. Well, we currently have a very a national incentives schemes for clean technologies in vehicles, that is electric vehicles, hybrid vehicles, and natural gas and dedicated natural gas vehicles. So we have VAT elimination, custom something with the custom fees, and then a tax credit reduction. So for the first one, that is just a tax that we have in all our products here in Colombia. If you buy an electric vehicle or an hybrid vehicle or a dedicated natural gas vehicle, then you get like an exemption of that tax. That is you don't pay the 16% tax in the like for the purchase. Then when talking about the custom fee, that is related to the payment of a tax for the importation of the vehicle, we have like two categories. For electric vehicles and for electric charging stations, we have the elimination of the tax, so you don't pay the 35% tax for the importation of the vehicle. And then for the hybrid vehicles, which are basically light-duty vehicles, then you you don't pay 35%, but you pay 5% of that tax. And then you have the tax credit reduction, that is something like an income tax. So if you buy a vehicle with this technology, then you don't put the 100% of the investment in the base for calculating the income tax. But with those incentives that are from 2013, we have a total of 707 vehicles, 95 electric vehicles that have come into the country with those incentives schemes. As you can see, most of them are vehicles for the public transport of passengers. Those are buses, hybrid buses here in Bogota, and natural gas buses in Medellin, and we have some taxi cabs and trains with electricity for Bogota and for Medellin also. Well, which are the projects that we have currently here in the country related to mobility? Well, we have here in Bogota hybrid trucks for doing the transportation of urban freight. We have also electric vehicles from Coca-Cola, which are in charge of the urban freight transportation of the company. We also have a very important project of electric taxi cabs in Bogota. Also electric motorcycles in Bogota. We have 100 electric motorcycles operating here in the city, and we also have this year we start with the operation of the first public recharge station. Also, it is very important to mention the effort of Transmilenio by bringing hybrid buses to be operating in Transmilenio and in the integrated public transport system of the city. We are having around 300 vehicles right now operating, and we also have vehicle tests that has been developed well in different cities of the country. We have a fabricate an electric bus that was fabricated in Cali for MIO, that is the massive transport system of Cali. And we also have tests of an electric bus in Medellin for an university, and electric buses from PHEV here in Bogota that will be operating on the Transmilenio system. In this slide, I just wanted to show you the technologies that are available for private transport in the city, and which are like the technical specifications and the costs that they have here in the country. Currently, we have 121 vehicles in operation, and one of the most important reasons we are pushing to introduce this technology in the country is the efficiency of the vehicles compared with the internal combustion vehicles. Well, as I said you at the beginning, we have several barriers, and that's for the entrance of the technology, and that's why we just have we have like small or little goals in terms of the entrance of electric vehicles. So one of the most important reasons, or one of the most important barriers for immobility is the low cost of the gasoline vehicles, that is automobiles and motorcycles. So as you saw in the last slide, the cheapest vehicle we have is a vehicle of $40,000 compared with the cheapest gasoline vehicle that is $8,000. So, and when you talk about motorcycles, you can have motorcycles like an electric motorcycle of $18,000 compared with a gasoline motorcycle of $1,000. So the cost of the vehicle is one of the highest barriers. Then the incentives that we have are not enough, and are not enough not only for the vehicles, but in terms of the fuel. For example, the electricity here in Colombia has like some additional taxes that gasoline, for example, doesn't have. And also another important barrier is that we don't have the infrastructure for electrical vehicles, and that is the egg and chicken, or the hen and egg travel, I guess. Okay, as you could know, Colombia has a very clean energy generation metrics. More than 71% of the generation here in the country is with renewable energy, that is hydroelectric energy, or we use biomass, or we have aeolic energy that is available for electricity. So that clean matrix is one of the highest incentives to motivate the use of electric vehicles here in the country. And when we see the perspectives of generation for 2028, for example, what we can see is that we are very optimistic in improve this generation with renewable sources and try to introduce more biomass, solar energy, geothermal energy, to increment the percentage or the participation of renewable sources in the generation. That is one of the reasons we are very interested in electric mobility. We also have like a signal of the government, that is the law 1715 of the last year, in which the government is promoting the use of renewable, non-conventional energy and clean technologies, and it creates a fund of the Mines and Energy Ministry to support projects on clean energy that is called PHEV. Which are the next steps that we are working on in this topic of energy efficiency, and specifically in electric mobility? Well, we are thinking about developing vehicle pilots with hybrid technologies for freight and for other categories in the transport. We have now investments like money that we can use for freight urban freight vehicles. We also are participating and organizing several discussion boards in which we are trying to promote the electric technologies, for example, in taxis in Bogota and in general in the whole country. We are not talking only about electricity, but natural gas, LPG, liquefied natural gas, etc. We also have several projects in which we are doing an important emphasis on the transport sector and on the efficiency and on that sector, and of course we are including all related to e-mobility. And we also elaborate some reports with the projections of demand of energy of the transport sector, in which we design several scenarios of technology penetration in the country. So that's it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Carolina. It was a very nice overview of developments in Colombia. Now we have the opportunity to answer some questions. We received quite a lot, and it's a bit of a task here to operate this webinar software and review those questions at the same time. I'd first like to briefly summarize what was discussed, kind of set the scene. And before I do that, I'd just like to say these presentations will be made available on our website to participants at a later point. We had an interesting overview from all four participants. I think kind of a general theme is that electric vehicle sales are actually lower than many anticipated. Lou pointed out that the global market reached about 300,000 and is expected to maybe reach 400,000 this year. He presented an interesting perspective on the phases that were in phase 2, where tax incentives play an important role, at least in the U.S. for sales. In China, it's very interesting to see a significant number of policies in place to support electric vehicle sales. But despite this, we do see slower growth than anticipated and numbers below the 2015 targets. EU is an interesting observation that I saw was that actually electric vehicle sales of around 220K surpassed the plug-in hybrid sales of around 60K. I believe this is a very significantly different picture in the United States, for instance, or Japan. And European targets and recent developments in market, as well as infrastructure and production brand information are important. And in Colombia, it's interesting to see such system-wide planning in the transport sector and an emphasis on public fleets and taxis. So we can see that this is an emerging trend in all over the world. And now we'll shift to some questions. We have some general questions, but I'll address a question or so to each. If you could be very, very concise in your response, we only have around 10 minutes, so maybe a 30-second answer. For Lou, there's been much discussion about Tesla's Gigafactory in California and similar factories in Asia and elsewhere. Obviously, battery price is important, but how important? Are there other factors that are driving adoption or that will drive adoption of electric vehicles, such as charging infrastructure? Simply put, what is the largest hindrance for greater EV adoption in your view?
It's a good question. I do think that the Gigafactory and other factories like it are part of a massive scale-up of battery capacity that matters and will hopefully help continue to push prices down. We're probably somewhere between $300 and $400 per kilowatt hour in the batteries that are being produced today. If we can get that down to 200, that'll make a big difference. But it's not the only factor. And I think maybe the mismatch between, what Tesla has shown us, apart from, that their high-range vehicles are popular with very wealthy people, is that, a lot of technologies in automotive are actually introduced in the premium segments and premium models. And we've been trying to introduce electrification with a lot of more modest segments, price-conscious buyers. And I think we might, with some of the new BMW models and some others that we're going to see, I think we're going to begin to see a return to using these premium segments for early adoption, and in a way to make it sexy, to make it something that everybody sees, in sports cars. So I think those kinds of trends together should make a big difference.
Very nice, thank you. We actually had another question that says, on this topic, one of the barriers mentioned was vehicle costs. Could speakers indicate if the battery is the main driver? We just mentioned that, and what a price per kilowatt hour would be that would make them competitive with ICEs. Do you want to venture for an estimate?
Well, I mean, like I said, I think it all depends on what you assume about the way people discount the fuel costs. But typically, we figure that you got to get down to $200. So we're getting close. It's probably come down from $800 to $1,000 per kilowatt hour 5 years ago to maybe close to $3 now. So if we can get down to $2, $200 a kilowatt hour if you've got a 40 kilowatt hour vehicle, that's still $8,000 you're paying for your battery. So it still matters. So you got to at least get to that point. And then there's going to be pressure, like I mentioned, the GM Bolt coming along and some of these other high range models are going to put a lot more kilowatt hours on those cars. So I think we need to get below 200 to really get into the sweet spot of competitiveness.
Great, thank you. Next question is for Jian Liu in China. Jian, you discussed a lot about four-wheel vehicles, trucks,
yes,
buses. What about growth in two- and three-wheelers? Some estimates put totals at over 100 million today or soon. Where is this market segment heading in China? Electric two- and three-wheelers.
yes, it's an interesting question, because there's some controversial issues about these two-wheelers and three-wheelers electric vehicles. And I have to say, for the government, maybe they have a higher expectation for the electric cars rather than two-wheelers and three-wheelers. But in reality, some provinces in the east coast, around the east coast of China, they already, some vehicle manufacturers, they already produce a lot of this kind of small electric vehicles and mini electric vehicles. And the market response is also very good in some this kind of second class and third class cities. So in that case, the government is also thinking about this new trend and try to introduce some new policy to promote electric vehicles in general, rather than focus on the big electric vehicles. So yes, it's a very interesting trend, and some experts in China also have some discussion about this topic, and probably in future different kinds of electric vehicles will serve different markets in China.
Okay, thank you. I'll shoot the next questions to Garen Meyer. We had a question about Europe, and it actually, I think, was I mentioned this. Do you know what the driver behind the higher adoption of electric vehicles as opposed to plug-in hybrid electric vehicles in Europe is?
Let me take a look into the numbers, and I see some countries that are very strong in having clearly a focus just on battery electric vehicles, whereas plug-in hybrids do not play a role at all. That is the case, for example, in France, and that seems to be the case interestingly in Norway as well. I'm saying interestingly because Norway is a country that is quite big. It's narrow in shape but very long. I think it stretches around 2,000 kilometers or even more, and it's rare. I mean, scarcely populated. So probably people have to drive a lot to get into a bigger city, for example. But one of the reasons I think in Norway for this is that in many cases electric vehicles are kind of a second car. So maybe something you're using more in a local environment. And I could imagine that this is also a reason in the other countries where we have a little bit bigger share of battery electric vehicles compared to plug-in hybrids. Battery electric vehicles are, I think, fit for purpose in fleet operations, which is something that is very, very common in some European countries. It's also growing in Germany at the moment. But as soon as you have examples of, for example, a national post or some other big institutions picking this technology up, they are applying it in fixed, under quite limited or well-defined conditions, where they can surely say that the vehicle will never have to exceed, for example, a range of 100 kilometers per day. So in those cases, it makes perfect sense to buy the simpler solution of a battery electric vehicle compared to a plug-in hybrid vehicle. But there's, of course, other cases like Germany, for example, where the opportunity of being able to go to, for example, say northern Italy any day you want is a must for a private owner of a car, and therefore plug-in hybrids in our country at least are pretty much the same share as by battery electric vehicles. I don't know, as you're, it's a bit difficult to find the one answer for Europe, but maybe these are one of, or two or three of the main ideas on that.
Great, thank you. I'll pose a question to Carolina. We have a question that relates to utilities and oftentimes a reluctance to embrace higher shares of renewable energy. Of course, this is a power sector issue, but maybe you can bring up some examples in Colombia about the utilities' willingness or interest in this shift towards electrification, if in fact they view it as an opportunity or a threat, to what extent they consider this, with electric charging infrastructure as something that they embrace or they don't. You're unmuted.
Nick?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Nick, I cannot hear you very well, like the last part of the question. I'm sorry.
Certainly, no problem. So the question was,
Now,
can you hear me?
yeah, right now, yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. So the question was related that sometimes we observe utility operators that are reluctant to embrace higher penetration of renewable energy. They view it as a financial burden. And to what extent are utilities in Colombia, if you're familiar with this, open to this shift towards electrification? Do they view this as an opportunity or a threat? And how does this relate to charging infrastructure if they're embracing charging infrastructure?
Well, as I think all of us know, and because it is something that happens in all the countries, I guess, the technology is really very expensive, and here in Colombia, one of the highest barriers, well, is the the investment in the technology, because for you to close the business, for you to close for having like a financial close of the business, then you need a lot of time working on the technology. Let me give you an example. With the taxis here in Bogota, the savings that you really have are in the cost of the energy, because you spend very less energy by using electricity than when you use gasoline or even natural gas. The problem is that you see the complete benefit, like in I don't know, 8 or 10 years. So that is one of the very important barriers, and in the experience with the hybrid vehicles in the Transmilenio, they are having a similar situation, that the investment they have to do is really high at the first moment. The persons here doesn't have like a capacity of, getting a credit from the bank, because the money you need is a lot. So you need a lot of time to recover the inversion. There are some cases in which, for example, I cannot speak about that in the presentation because I didn't have enough time, but in the hybrid vehicles, you can see that when you compare the hybrid technology with a diesel technology, like a similar diesel technology, when you get the exemption of the VAT, then the hybrid vehicle is even cheaper than the diesel one. So there are some cases in which the cost is not a barrier, but there are several cases in which you need a lot of time to recover the investment.
Okay, so unfortunately that will have to end it today for our questions and answer session. Thank you very much to our 4 panelists for presenting and answering the limited number of questions that we were able to pose. We received many, many more. These will be grouped and then sent to our individual panelists, and they will have the opportunity to respond either directly via email or through me. The discussion will continue at the IRENA community. And next steps, we will summarize this discussion and other developments in the electric vehicle market and share it with the Transport Action team and certain elements with publicly with the IRENA community for further discussion about market developments and potentials going forward. And as I mentioned, this will be used for the development of the next REmap report and various other projects here ongoing at IRENA. A quick side note is there will be another webinar here within the next few months that will actually focus on the other big topic in the transport sector, specifically advanced biofuel technologies, also a segment that in recent years hasn't seen a realization of the potential that a lot of people envisioned, but is certainly growing and extremely interesting. So with that, I would like to wrap up. I would like to thank again our speakers and everybody who listened in. We had very good participation and many questions. We will come back to you, and that discussion will continue online. If you have any questions, you're also welcome to email us at remap@irena.org and find out more information about REmap at irena.org/remap. With that, thank you very much, and the webinar will end. Have a great day. Bye-bye.